Good evening. Welcome to today's class. Thank you for the delay in the start. Um, Apologies for the delay in the start. But yes, we are here now. In the previous class, we looked at propositional language and operators associated, and we also looked at predicate logic and the operators associated. Those were the quantifiers. So now in this class, we are now going to look at questions relating to that. So if you go into the past exam papers, you see question 2 and question 3 will be speaking to that. So today I've looked at 4 past papers. We're going to answer questions from 4 past papers, and you should be able to reconstruct the skills that we've used when you attempt questions on your own. Right, let's proceed. You will be given, you are going to be given a predicate or sort of definitions of predicates provided. Right? Definitions of predicates provided and the constant where necessary, right? That's all you'll be given. Now, you need to remember all the properties or all the operators that you can use and how you can use them. Remembering that on the very last slide from last time, from Monday, you realize that we said you have to be very careful on where you use universal quantification and existential quantification, right? And then we also said you find that there are some keywords that you're going to come across, and you have to really be careful for those. Now, translate each of the following first order logic sentences into English using into an English sentence using the so we're supposed to here we're supposed to translate from English to first order logic, like that. So this one says, unless Patrick plays in days and years, Jabulani watches either enemies or not, or Third Street. What did we say unless means? We said unless means whenever we have unless, we are going to have not Q implies P. Q being what comes after unless, right? So as a note, we can say Q comes after unless. Q comes after unless. So what is coming after unless? It is Patrick playing in days and years. So we say Patrick does not play in days and years. So X plays in Y. This is the predicate we use. So we say not play, right? Patrick days. Patrick does not play in days and years. If, right? If, and then we give this statement, which is the one that comes before the unless. So there's a comma here. So this is coming directly after the unless, then this is the other part of the statement. Now, Jabulani watches either enemies or not, or Third Street. So we're saying someone watches, watch. Who's watching? Jabu watches enemies, right? So enemies. Or, right, so we can put a bracket there. We can have watch Jabu watches Third Street. Third, like that. Then we can complete them. So this is how we would translate this. Any questions? Right. Next we have, if Third Street is not a soap opera, but Days and Years is, Patrick or Jabulani watches enemies or not. So we have an if statement here. The if statement, this is if the first part ends here, and then the then goes there, right? So under the implication, we also have a but, which is an end, and then we have an O over here. All right. So if Third Street is not a soap opera, right? So we are saying soap opera, uh, soap, Third Street, right? Third is not a soap opera, but which is an end. Days and years is soap. Days and years is a soap opera. Then, so these are going to be in one big bracket. Then, Patrick or Jabulani watch Enemies or Not. So watch. So Patrick, Enemies, or this is another big bracket. Watch Jabu, Enemies, like that. Then we can close this off. So this becomes the interpretation. The next one we have Patrick either plays Third Street or plays in Third Street or in Enemies or Not, but not in both. So when we say not in both, when we want to say not in both, so not both, if we've got want to say not both P and Q, right? So this is not both P and Q. This is definition of not both. But we want Patrick to play in one or but not both. So we can then say Patrick plays in Third Street. So Patrick plays in Third Street. Come on. We need to say play, not Pat. So we've got play. Patrick in Third Street. Or play Patrick Enemies. Right? This is the first part. And not in both. So this but is this end. Not in both. So not both means play at third right and so let's put over here we are going to play pet enemies, and then we close this off. So we see this negation is applied to this whole bracket over here. So this one says he plays in Third Street or Enemies or Not or both, but this one says we want its conjunction when both are both is not involved. Right. That is how we do it. Next, we can say I want to give it to English, right? So this one says Pet and Jabu watch Third Street if and only if they play in it, right? So we can say Pet and so this is Patrick. So we need to write full names now. So Patrick and Jabu Jabulani watch 3rd Street if and only if they play in it. They play in it. That would be the interpretation. So one can also write and say Pet and Jabu watch 3rd Street if and only if Pet and Jabu play in 3rd Street. So that is that is what it means. So this is the interpretation. The next one we can have we have got quantifiers present, right? So we've got an existential quantifier, we've got conjunctions inside, it should be fine. So we want to say X refers to someone who's not an actor, right? Right? We can say there is or there exists someone who plays in days and years, and is not an actor and does not watch it. So this becomes the interpretation. So they exist. There was someone. Another way to put it would be simply to say someone plays in days and years, and does not watch it, and also is not an actor. Someone who is not an actor plays in days and years and does not watch it. That is also acceptable. Right. So does not watch. Fine. Anytime you have a question, so feel free to stop me. Then next one. X, right? So here we've got the universal quantifier. Now you see they've given it us with the implication. So on the left here we say they are describing what X is. Right? So X plays in enemies, right? X plays in enemies or not. So all those that play in enemies or not do not watch it. Right? So all that play in enemies or not. So in enemies or not, do not watch it. Right. So who are we describing? All players in the in enemies or not. What do? They do not watch it. Right. Then next one. There is at least one soccer team. So okay, cool. So we are moving on to the next question. In the next question, there we can translate. There is at least one soccer team that beats foxes but does not beat falcons. There is a existential quantifier. So right. So what does the quantifier refer to? At least one soccer team. So there is a soccer team. Soccer team is that. So we say there is a soccer team. So team X, right? That beats the falcon, and team X beats the falcon. beats X beats the Falcons, right? But does not beat that beats the Foxes, but does not beat the Falcons. Sorry, Foxes and does not beat the Falcons. Not beat Falcons. So we can see obviously that the subject matter is this team that beats the Foxes but does not beat the Falcons. All right. Next one. If Steve is a soccer player but does not play for the Falcons, the Foxes beat the Falcons. If then, right, Steve is a soccer player but does not play for the Falcons, so Steve is a soccer player. So we've got player Steve and does not play for the Falcons, not play Steve Falcons or Falcons. Then we have implies that the Foxes beat the Falcons. Beat Foxes Falcons. Okay, and that is enough. Right, next one. Right. We have a pretty huge one. We've got this quantifier opens this bracket and it is only closed at the end. So this quantifier works everything there. So here we say we've got two conjunctions. So we've got player and all of this over here. We've got player and all of this over here. So X is a soccer player. That's the subject. X is a soccer player. Right? So here we have got X plays for Falcons or X plays for Foxes, but not both. Right? So we say all soccer players play for all soccer players play for the Foxes or the Falcons, but not both. The Foxes or the Falcons, but not both. Falcons, but not both. Nice. Sweet. Moving on. We've got double quantifiers here. So X refers to what? X refers to a soccer player and Y refers to a soccer team, right? So here we're saying, speaking of the existence of a soccer player that plays for all teams, right? So X plays for Y. Some soccer player plays for all teams, right? So we can say there is a soccer player that plays for all teams that beat Foxes. So why beat Foxes? All teams that the soccer player play for beat Foxes. Right? There is a soccer player such that I'm going to write it differently, such that any team he plays for, they play for beats the Foxes. So Remember, universal quantification can be used to mean any, all, every, right, or every team they play for, this default. So you can pick any one of them. Right. The next one, we now have a new one. So this is the third paper now. This one says, whenever Pamela and Tom both study, whenever they study, each time, every time Pamela and Tom study, right? Every time Pamela and Tom study, so all the times that Pamela and Tom study, both of them study. So studying is what is given in studying for Y hours, right? So every time they study, so every time they study, which means they study for some hours, right? So let's say X and Y, these are the hours of study that they do. So we are going to have Pamela studying. Pamela studying. So what is studying? Studies. Whenever Pamela and Tom studies, she studies for more than 2 hours and he studies for more than an hour. So studies, Pamela is Pam. Pam, this is X hours, and studies Tom, that's Y hours, right? This implies that X is greater than 2 and Y is greater than 1. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Let me just go back to where we were. Right. So we're saying X is greater than 2, and so I need to remove that and say, and this is supposed to be a conjunction, right? And Y is greater than 1. Y is greater than 1. So we can close this square bracket off like that. We can close this square bracket like that. Right. Then the next one, some friend of Pamela but not of Tom. Some friend of Pamela but not of Tom. So X, we have got friend, X and Y are friends. So we are told that we've got some friend of Pamela. So we have got X is a friend of Pamela but not a friend of Tom. Right? So some friend of Pamela. So friends, Pam, X, and not friends, Tom, X, right? Some friends, what do they do? They do not study, right? Do not study, right? Do not study, right? So we want to say they do not study, meaning our predicate says studies for X hours, right? So we can say we want to say they do not study for any hour, right? Do not study for any hour, right? So let's say all the hours of study that they use, right? All Y, right? And we have got do not study. The friend X does not study for Y hours, right? He does not study for Y meaning all the hours, right? but drives around in Cape Town. And what they do, they drive around in Cape Town. So what does it mean? Drive around so drive, X drives around in Cape, like that. All right. So the tricky part was to discover or to say this. So in this case, right, I've seen other people attempt to say X studies for 0 hours. Right? X studies for 0 hours. We can possibly say uh, um, X or some Y, and then we say Y is equals to 0. Right? That could, I think, possibly work. But I said all hours does not study for all hours. For all hours. So it does not study at all. So that works fine as well. Now, this one says we want to write to English now. So Tom studies for X hours. So X, all the hours that Tom studies. Right? For all the hours that Tom studies. Right? There's a friend of Tom, all of Tom's friends, all of Tom's friends, um, all of Tom's friends, there's Z, do not study for Z hours, right? Each time, right, every time Tom studies, his friends do not, all his friends do not study. So every time Tom studies, all his friends do not study. Okay? They do not study. Every time that he studies, his friends do not study. Fine. Then translate this, right? There is some city that Pem drives in that city is not Cape Town. So Pem drives in some city but not in Cape Town. That's a better way of writing it. So you can say Pem drives in some city but not in Cape Town. In Cape Town. All right. Then next we can have this is the last question. There is at least one soccer team that beats the Foxes but do not beat the Falcons. So we're going back to a similar one that we had before. There is at least one soccer team that beats the Foxes but do not beat the Falcons. So there exists a team. I'm feeling that we will do this. So I think we've done this. We have done this. I think we have done this, right? No, not really, no. So let's just do it. There's at least one soccer team that beats the Foxes but does not beat the Falcons. There exists some soccer team, right? So we've got a team, there exists a soccer team, right? That beats the Falcons, and this team beats the Falcons. X beats the Falcons, but does not beat the Foxes. X does not beat the Foxes, like that. Right, so we definitely did this one. This one says if Steve is a soccer player but does not play for the Falcons, right? Steve is a soccer player, so player Steve and does not play for the Falcons. Not play. Steve does not play for the Falcons. Then the Foxes beat the Falcons Foxes beat the Falcons. All right, like that. So you might have came across something like this. Then here we say we want to translate to that. So all soccer teams that do not beat the Foxes, uh, Steve does not play for them. Right? So you can say Steve does not play for soccer teams. Soccer teams that do not beat the Foxes. That do not beat Foxes. Like that. Right. So as you practice with time, it gets easier to do. The last one, here we have got this special one here. So what this means, it says all x not like that. Right? So we can rewrite this to say team x and all y, team y implies beat x y. Right, so we'll look 1, 2, 2, 3. We'll look into the meaning of this. But now, if you check here, we say some x, right? So here we're saying not some, or rather, we can say they exist. So the negation of they being in existence is nothing at all, nothing existing. So X here refers to no team, no soccer team, right? So team Y, if Y is a soccer team, right, and then X is also a soccer team, then no soccer team beats team Y, right? No soccer team beats all teams. Right? This is a little bit of a tricky one, but we're saying no soccer team beats all other soccer teams. Right. So you are saying there is no existence, right? And then Y is saying all soccer teams. Right. So like that. Right. Any questions? Any questions? Right. If there are no questions, then we can call it a day, a night rather, and then we are going to meet each other again next week, Monday, same time. Right. So enjoy the rest of your evening and have a good weekend. Goodbye.